Good evening and welcome everybody to tonight's Web3 and Crypto Basics Trading Bootcamp. This is week 7. So if you have landed here because you've heard about our guest speaker tonight, or you've come across this live bootcamp that we started back in July, not a problem. You can access the recordings to the entire 8 weeks inside of the platform. All you need to do is you can either go, I've shared the link inside of the Zoom at the very, very top. So if you haven't signed up and you want to get access to all the recordings from the past weeks, you can go ahead and do that. We have partnered up with All Things Blockchain, Insightful, EvolvH3R and Jana Crypto Queen, which I'm not going to go through too much tonight because we went through that at the very beginning. But if you found your way here through a recording or on tonight's session to tune in and learn about DAOs and DePINs, and you want to learn more about the crypto trading fundamentals and the Web3 basics, please go ahead and sign up. And tonight we are going to be talking about the introductions to DAOs and DePINs. So if you're very new to the industry, you may have not heard of DePINs before. So tonight you're going to get some insights from our guest speaker, Dominique. He's actually from Australia originally, but lives over in Europe, and he is going to talk to us about Hivelo. He's a serial entrepreneur. We'll introduce him a little bit later on. But before we jump into that, I'm just going to go through some quick announcements. So as I mentioned before, we've got the Web3 Basics Bootcamp that we've been running for the last, this is week 7. And then this will be turning into the Education Hub. And we're going to have a series of different short courses on demand. So we'll have the Web3 Basics, the Crypto Trading Basics, and then we'll have the TradFi to DeFi. And all of that will be inside of the Education Hub. So whether you want to access it or you think you know somebody else, all of the content is free and is provided by our sponsors and community partners that we work with to make this educational content accessible for people to be learning about the Web3 ecosystem. My background as an educator, I've been teaching for many of years. So I just want to give you a bit of a warning. If you are new to the crypto and Web3 space, or if this is your first session with us, it can be information overload, especially if you're joining us today and you haven't been with us from the very beginning and you don't have the understanding of what is blockchain and cryptocurrency. Talking about DAOs and DePINs might just be a bit like way too much information for you, but don't worry, it just takes time. It's an interactive program. I will jump in and show you what the group looks like at the very end for those of you that want to stick around. But basically, it's just going to be a house where we'll have all of our short courses, and we've been delivering and providing all of the recordings from the sessions that we've been doing live. And I always like to remind everybody to always be careful of scammers, especially in this digital economy, especially with AI and deep fakes and crypto and people trying to get rich quick. And they also go to areas where people are trying to learn and try to manipulate them. So please just be very, very careful. We've covered security. We're going to cover a lot about security in some of the other short courses that we have coming up that we'll be building out for the remainder of the year. So please just protect yourself. So what's the best way that you can get the most out of tonight's session is just really be open to learning about a new paradigm, taking notes, whether it's a notepad or good old-fashioned pen and paper. Write down those questions, ask the questions in the chat. You can always ask the questions in the group after the class and engage. That's the best way that you're going to learn, is by engaging with others, supporting. There's a lot of students that are in the group that support, they share links. It's a peer-to-peer learning environment. I'm just here to guide you and provide you a platform, but it's a very, very big industry, and we need to kind of work together to collaboratively share information. So before we jump in and talk about tonight's topic, where we're going to unpack what are DePINs with our guest speaker, and then we're going to jump in and talk about DAOs in the second half of the lesson, I want to talk about events because they're a very big part of everything that we do at All Things Blockchain and EvolvH3R, which I know many of you do know. So we have been bringing in guest speakers over the last couple of weeks, and we'll have lots of other events. So you can sign up to the Luma calendar. Maybe you found us on the Luma, so you've already signed up, but ATB and then EvolvH3R have different Luma calendars because we do different types of events. So the next event that we have coming up online will be to meet the Binance General Manager of the APAC region, and then we'll be in Token 49. So you can go ahead and sign up on the Luma calendar for ATB to get those notifications. And then EvolvH3R, we host a different series of events which are focused on empowering more women in the ecosystem. And we'll be doing a couple of events at Token 49 and then at the Australian Crypto Convention in November. We're just working in and locking in those details. So we host a lot of events in person, online. So there's always opportunities for you to be tuning in with us. And if you subscribe to our Luma calendars, then you'll get notifications of those events, whether they be online or in person. So if you've been following along for the last, few weeks doing our boot camp, we had a game going on where if you completed weekly quizzes, you got points. If you engaged, you earn points. If you like and comment and support each other, you earn points. And we have some giveaways that we're giving away. Oh, I must have not included it in this slide. I must have forgot to copy it over. But we have some Bybit merch boxes. We have some USDT ups for grabs. We have some tickets for those of you that are in Australia going to the Australian Crypto Convention. So we have a whole bunch of prizes for people to be winning who've been participating along in the bootcamp. Now, if you've only just found us and you do want to get in there and start testing your knowledge, you can do that. You can still earn points. All the recordings, all of the learning resources are inside of the education group that we have. And the link, if you're tuning in after I've kind of started this recording, the link to join the group is at the very top of the Zoom message, or you can kind of scan the QR code. I'll share it with you again at the end of the lesson. So quick disclaimer, all this information is for education purposes only. We are going to talk about DePIN and how you can make money in DePIN. We call it the download to earn, kind of phase. But we are not recommending that you go and invest money in DePIN or start investing in any type of hardware and interacting with these platforms. We are merely just providing you education. So it's not advice. We're not financial advisors. Please go and do your own research. So if you've been following along and if you have just joined us, we provide you a lot of research activities. So for example, there's always a learning activity that comes with every lesson. And tonight will be about going and doing your own research. Because if you do want to speculate and you do want to invest in different projects, you really need to learn how to understand them and see if they're actually a good investment, right? Warren Buffett says is to find an undervalued company and then invest in it. But how do you know if it's undervalued? How do you know if it actually has long-term potential? And you have to learn how to do your own research. All of these sessions are recorded and they are shared in the Education Hub for you. So I'm going to jump into what are DAOs and DePINs, and then we are going to bring in Dominique. Now I've told him to join us around the 7:30 mark because I wanted to kind of get through these introductions. But before we jump in, I'm just going to see, I think a few people into the Education Hub. Yes, I'll share the link for you. Now I have a question that I'm going to put up here in the poll if you just give me one moment. Where's my polls? All right, I'm just going to launch this. So I just want to know who has actively participated in a DePIN project. So you have, whether you're using their hardware, whether it could be Helium. I know that there's a few different, there's Demio, there's different types of DePIN projects out there. And if you've answered yes, which we've had a couple, can you please share the name and potentially a link to the project that you have, actively participated in inside of the chat? That would be amazing. So we got a majority of people that have said no, and we have a few yeses. So I'm interested to see who is already actively participated in and what they are participating with. There are many. Should I share? There are many. Well, maybe even just one or two. I'm just curious, which maybe was the first one that you got involved in. Hi, Velo. Okay, well, that's who our guest speaker is tonight. But just interested because DePIN is a very new vertical. Like even for me, I'm not an expert in DePIN. I'm gonna basically give you the introduction by the terminology and the definition. I'm probably just one pay grade above understanding deepens on a deep kind of technical level, and then there's different deepen projects that work different ways. Okay, so I am still personally learning about the deepen industry. And speak of Dominique, he's actually just coming in now. So we're going to learn about High Velo tonight, but before we just jump in and hand over to Dominique, who I think I've just seen piling in, is just give you a base understanding of the terminology so that you can have a little bit of an understanding of what he's talking about when he's talking about what is DePIN and what is High Velo, and he'll give a deeper understanding. But it stands for decentralized physical infrastructure networks. Now, try to say that 10 times fast. Now, I've been in this space since, late 2017, early 2018. And for me, this is a relatively new concept. So for a lot of you, you may have never heard about it, or you've maybe heard the term and you really don't understand what it is, and you are in the right place. So it uses blockchain technology, which we've covered in previous lessons. Okay, so if you don't understand blockchain, you got to go back and watch those pre-recordings. But it basically allows us to take these kind of real world infrastructures and allows to use blockchain to kind of create these new communities. And it's built and maintained by a community of contributors. So that's why I asked the question earlier. And thank you to everyone that is putting in the projects that they've been a part of, because I wanted to know who here has actively already participated in some of these DePIN projects. Like I see High Velo, there's a lot of them here I haven't heard of. Grass, Ping. So thank you for sharing those. And I really encourage people to kind of go and use some of these ones as a research activity that we're going to provide for you. But contributors and Dominique is going to go through this a little bit more on how you can contribute, but each of these DePIN projects will have different ways that you can contribute to their ecosystem and then be rewarded generally in the form of what is a token. And we unpacked what tokens were in a previous lesson, but that is kind of your reward for participating. So similar to kind of like Bitcoin mining, but this is particularly for that particular DePIN project. So if you want to learn a little bit more about some of the top DePIN projects, I always share articles for you to jump into. So we're going to hand it over in just a moment. But for people that want to understand how it works on a very high level, oops, sorry, I've just kind of gone the wrong way with my annotations. So people provide a physical resource, okay? So that can be bandwidth, it could be storage, it could be energy. And then they use these things called smart contracts, which we have unpacked a little bit in previous lessons. Well, this is where the blockchain comes in, and this is how it's tracked on chain. And they verify kind of the usage and the performance. And then they get rewarded these tokens for contributing, as I just mentioned previously, like mining. And then ultimately, in theory, in due time, this network becomes this kind of self-sustaining. The more people that join the network and provide more bandwidth or provide more power, depending on what DePIN project it is. And tonight we're going to learn about High Velo and their network and how you can participate and contribute to their DePIN ecosystem. But the same concept applies. It will just be across different DePIN projects. So that's a high-level introduction to DePIN. Now, I believe, Dominique, you are there. Yes? Can hear me, see me. Thank you so much for joining us. Beautiful.
I can hear you fine, and I've got a presentation that I'm happy to run through as well. But I'm at your call.
Perfect. Well, I was going to stop sharing right now. I was just going to let you actually give yourself a little bit of a background. But for everybody, I personally met Dominique. I can't even remember where I met you now. I want to say in Toronto, but it was probably before then. But he's actually from Australia, which is where I'm living now, and was the CEO of Banksa and took that company public and is now left and is co-founded High Velo and has a very long, successful career history. So I thought I would just let you do a quick introduction to yourself, and then you can take away the screen and share your presentation.
Yeah, thanks Danielle, and g'day everyone. And g'day Paul from Cicada as well. Just FYI, I'm working with you guys already, you may recall.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Excellent. Danielle, just remind me, how much time do we have, and how interactive do you want me to make the session with everyone? Because I'd like to try and keep it as interactive. People have got questions, they can send them through the chat request.
Yes, perfect. We love questions. We're big on interaction. And I usually lot in 30 minutes, but we can go longer than that. We generally run our sessions about 90 minutes. So I usually leave it up to how interactive the students are.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Just in terms of background, as I'm sure you can tell, originally from Australia, but now based in the Netherlands. Been involved in tech since mid-90s and crypto since 2013. Launched a number of companies in the space, including Banksa that Danielle mentioned, which is listed. In fact, the company's in the process of getting taken out by a much larger public company as we speak. And saw this whole concept of DePIN, and maybe before I sort of jump into Havelo, just to try and paint the picture around what DePIN is, um, and to give you, I guess, a live example. So DePIN as a concept is relatively new, but the concept of distributed computing goes back about 40 years ago. So there's a group out of the US called NASA, which I'm sure everyone's aware of. And NASA was collecting a bunch of data from space, and it simply didn't have the computing power to process all of this data. And so they set up a division which they ended up calling SETI, which was to try and solve this problem. So we're collecting all of this data with regards to the stars and the universe, but we can't actually see what's there because we just don't have the compute. And so they came up with the concept, with the idea that there are millions of computers around the world that at nighttime especially are basically sitting there not doing anything. Their CPU is being underutilized, or their computer resources are not being utilized. And so this first concept 40 years ago, you installed a little program on your computer called SETI. Every day you would download a bunch of data, your computer would process this and then send it back to NASA. And the prize, this is before blockchain and crypto, and your prize back then was that if you found a star or a galaxy, you were able to be involved in the naming process. So that was the prize or the reward back then. And that was the first real example of decentralized compute. Basically using computers around the world, retail people, not computers sitting in big data centers. And fast forward to where we are today, DePIN as a concept is about, I think, 2 years old, and 4 to 5 years if you go pre-DePIN, where they use effectively companies like us, like Havelo. We use the blockchain and crypto as a way of incentivizing people to join the network. And there's this concept called cold start. And when you're trying to build a network, you're basically starting from scratch. And so you use your token, you reward your token as a way of getting people to download our software, for example, or to buy a hardware device, or something along those lines. So that sort of gives you a little bit of background in terms of now Havelo. I'm just going to bring up the deck. I'm not going to go through a complete page turn, but just to give everyone a little bit of a flavor. The way that we position Havelo is like Airbnb for your computer. So allowing anyone to share their computer resources and get paid for it. And so Havelo is an aggregator. We aggregate, and as of today, we've aggregated 11 different DPINs onto our platform. DPINs that will use your CPU, your GPU. When I say a GPU, I mean your graphics card, particularly if you've got a NVIDIA graphics card, your storage, your IP, your bandwidth. So these are the different services or resources that your computer is basically being shared out on. And what we know is that DPINs are usually quite technically complicated. Many of them require Docker, some require Kubernetes. These are, whether it's a containerization software or an orchestration platform. And I'm basically using a bunch of technical terminology, and that's really why Havelo exists, where you don't even need to understand anything crypto to be able to use it. There's many DPINs require staking, which means you need to have the native token plus the gas and the relevant wallet associated with that. And there are over 1,000 DPINs, and there are more and more coming out all the time. And so we've basically created an application that you can install on your Windows, Mac, or Linux device. It will work out your system configuration. Is it a low spec device or a very bad connection? Or do you have a graphics card like a NVIDIA 4090 graphics card that's connected to high speed internet? And so with that data, it will then install the best DPINs to maximize the ROI. And then it's literally set and forget. And then the system over time, as you share your computer resources, you get paid. Let's call it those with a graphics card, because that's really where the money is today. We've got users earning 40, $50 a month consistently, just basically by sharing their computer resources, those that have a graphics card. There's a bunch of stuff we're doing around AI. If there's some specific questions around that, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, it's getting into sort of nerd territory. And the whole application is really download, connect and you connect your wallet and start earning. And then the team, you've got a team spread across Australia, Europe, and Vietnam. And the reason we can make this really simple without getting into too much of the tech terminology is that we're orchestrating many Web3 processes and making them look and feel like Web2. So you don't actually need to understand anything crypto. I'm not going to go through the sort of roadmap. And in terms of the business model, the app is free. We take a revenue share of all the tokens that are being mined on your computer, or basically where your computer's sharing out. And you as a consumer are also earning the Havelo token. So you're earning DPIN tokens, and you're also earning the Havelo token, which you can then stake. We've got a number of partnerships in the space already, and we've raised a bunch of capital from a number of VCs around the world. And so that's kind of, let's call it the formal, the formal part of the process. And definitely love to sort of take questions from people as part of this, and not just about Havelo, but whether you're talking about crypto or DPIN or what wallets you need to use. Feel free to basically put your question in the chat.
Well, thank you so much for that. Definitely put your question in the chat. I always have a couple of questions. So at the end there, you said you will earn DPIN tokens, and I'm assuming that you're talking about the project which they're participating in on your platform, because you're an aggregator, plus Havelo tokens. So you're earning two lots of different tokens. And what can people do with these tokens?
Yeah. So maybe just to take a step back and unpack that, if you've got a small a machine and not a very good connection, like an old 10-year-old machine, you'd maybe only be running 3 to 4 DPINs at the time. And so what that basically means that you'll be earning 4 different DPIN tokens, like Mysterium and AOS and Storage, for example, and the Havelo token. If you've got a really good machine, like a graphics card, then in that respect, you could be earning, $40, $50 per month, and the Havelo token as well. So things like Nasana and Theta are currently the DPINs that we've got on our platform that use your GPU. in terms of, there's a couple of questions, from Daryl and Roseanne around the security and privacy risks. So first and foremost, we run each of the DPINs in what they call their own containerized nodes. So it basically can only see inside this little container unless you give it a specific permission to look outside. And so there's not really a concern. If you do have a concern, use it on your spare computer. And I should say, just for everyone's note, if you've got a laptop and you're opening and closing it all the time, then don't use DPIN, whether it's Havelo or anything else on your computer. You're not going to make any money. DPINs rely on networks being available 24/7, and you just need to have your computer powered and connected to internet. In terms of the resources, so it doesn't obviously access your personal files or any of those particular areas. But if you're, for example, if you've got a job, a DPIN job to use your GPU, and you're trying to play Fortnite at the same time, you will definitely see a slowdown. But what I'd say in that respect, you're earning money, so pause Fortnite for 5 minutes or 10 minutes while that job completes, and then when the job's completed, go and play Fortnite again. So that just gives you, a bit of sort of insight onto how it works. And Nick asks, is it best for desktop or laptops? It actually doesn't matter whether it's a desktop, a laptop, or even like a little mini Raspberry Pi computer. The most important thing is the computer is on 24/7 connected to power and internet, because otherwise there's no point running anything DPIN. There's this concept called slashing, particularly in storage. If you say you commit to the DPIN projects and say, I'm going to make these files available to everyone, and then you open and close your computer all the time, you'll get slashed. So in effect, you will not earn any rewards. So there's no point doing that. And I've got it running at home on a spare laptop, connected to my solar panels, so it actually cost me zero. And at the office, I've got a desktop running as well. So it's just one of those things. Depending upon what machines you've got, if you've got a machine that's sitting there 24/7, then absolutely you can install Havelo and just earn some passive income.
One question that was missed from Martin: what is the minimum upload download speeds you need to work well?
Like a standard DSL connection is actually fine. So you actually don't need. There are certain DPINs that you leverage your IP, maybe leverage some bandwidth and some storage, that actually don't need high speed internet. In fact, you could even use 4G. 4G would be sufficient for most of the DPINs out there. Not that you'd use 4G, because you kind of want to use your DSL or your fiber connection, because you typically get pretty much unlimited data through that platform.
Yes, definitely. How much bandwidth does each project, and how many projects can you sign up for at once?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of questions coming through. So the question is, how much bandwidth does each project take, and how many projects? So RB, you basically sign up once and install Havelo once, and then automatically there's up to 11 DPINs that you can run concurrently. The system does it automatically. You don't have to actually worry about that. And it could use, depending upon the DPIN, it could use half a gig or a gig of data. So expect to have, you need to have a reasonable connection. Once again, if you're capped at 100, I mean, you're just not going to make DPIN work. And Dara asks, if we commit, for example, do we install an app? Is there container? When I was referring to the container, it was more of a technical term, Daryl. And so what it means is, when you install Havelo, Havelo is that aggregation orchestration platform. What we do then is we set up this container, either Docker or Podman. You can do some research there. And then we run Nasana inside that little container. So it can only see inside that little container, which is kind of like its own operating system. Once again, you don't have to know about it. You don't have to deal with it. You don't have to be a technical genius to be able to run it and install it. That's the whole purpose of Havelo. And so in that respect, it's a few clicks, set and go. There's a does the graphics card do the processing and any particular graphics card? So there's your CPU, then there's a GPU, which is your graphics card, your graphics processing unit. And typically most Windows devices, and you're asking, what particular graphics card, if you've got a NVIDIA 3090 minimum, ideally a NVIDIA 4090, you can pick them up for about $500. That would be a much better card to use, and you can kind of pick it up, secondhand. I've seen them around for about $500, and you could be earning 40, $50 a month. So from a pure payback perspective, you're talking about a 12-month payback, and those cards will last 3 years, if not longer. And obviously there are a different range of NVIDIA cards, and you just need to pick one up to suit your budget. And the graphics cards, just to maybe take a step back, and what are all these GPUs used for? Most GPUs out there today are utilized to train AI models. We know there is a huge increase in AI, and there's a big demand, an increasing demand for GPU cycles, which basically means more graphics cards out there sharing their computer resources, whether in big data centers or at your computer at home. And so in that respect, the best thing to do is you get a graphics card, and you basically let it run 24/7 and just let the jobs run through, and you earn money that way. RB asks, how can I validate that the rest of my data information on my laptop will remain secure? Well, Havelo is telling you that, and I'm saying that. However, if you are concerned, what I tell people, if you are concerned with regards to that, and particularly, and I'm going to say this just generally, if you've got a computer and you're running a hot wallet on a computer, and you're running a ledger, some cold storage, my personal view and recommendation is you have a separate computer to run your hot and cold wallet, and then you have another computer where you do your day-to-day stuff. Because sometimes, when we've got a computer, we're running different things, and sometimes a little pop-up will come up and say, hey, install this software, and you just sometimes don't think, and you just click it, and that could be a virus, or that could be something, some kind of phishing issue on your computer. And we've seen it many, many times before, not just with Havelo, just all around the world in terms of crypto, people getting scammed. So what I would say is, use Havelo or DePIN on your spare computer. And I would also always run your storage, your cold storage, and your hot wallets on a computer that you don't use day to day. Like that, if you're asking me what's the best thing to do from a security perspective, split the two.
Yeah, 100%. I actually attended a digital transformation workshop. It wasn't about crypto or blockchain, but it was a lot about cybersecurity and as businesses and different ways. And they were even saying, like, keep your business and your personal, separate. And then, we go one step layer with the crypto. And that kind of takes me into my next question in terms of, say, somebody that is interested and is looking for additional ways to make additional revenue streams. And I've heard over the years a lot of these kind of like plug and play type of different types of solutions. Now, if somebody is interested and kind of wants to get started, you touched on it a little bit earlier, like would maybe going and getting some secondhand, equipment from like an appliance store or something like that, and just kind of set up a PC and something, and just kind of set it up and kind of like get tested, and then like kind of over time it will, should pay for itself. And as you said, not doing it on your laptop. Or what kind of advice do you give somebody that is interested in getting started, not necessarily just with Havelo, but just in terms of, I'm like, okay, I want to participate in the DePIN network, and I'm going to need this hardware device, and I'm going to need internet compute, and I need to keep them separate. Like, where do you guide people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say today where the money is in AI, which then translates into GPU cycles. There's a big demand if you've got a NVIDIA 3090, NVIDIA 4090. There is demand for those graphics cards in your computer. What I tell people is go and buy a secondhand Windows device, get some kind of NVIDIA graphics card. You could basically do the two. I've seen them at swap meets for less than $1,000, and that's your computer that you use for all things DePIN. And you have it connected, sitting in the corner, earning 24/7, and you're contributing to the DePIN network. So that would be my recommendation. And that's not too dissimilar. If you want to run Helium, which is an IoT DePIN, or if you're in the US, Helium 5G DePIN, which is basically a device that creates a micro 5G network, you've got to go and spend $1,000 or $2,000 on that device. You plug it in, and then you basically get paid. So it's the same kind of concept. Because out there, once again, to take a step back, there are DePINs that require their own dedicated hardware, like Helium,
Demio?
Sorry,
Demio? Have you heard of that one?
the one that you plug into your car.
Yeah.
So there are multiple DePINs where you acquire a physical device and then you earn tokens to pay it off, or you can get a computer and basically do the same thing as well.
Nick, I like the way you think. Can you install multiple graphics cards and earn more?
Yeah. So the answer is you can do that. Whether or not a lot of the DePINs actually allow you to run multiple graphics cards, I'd have to go back and check with my engineering team, because most people don't have multiple graphics cards in their machine. They're lucky if they've got one. I'd be surprised if it doesn't, but Nick, I'm not going to answer that question until I've spoken to my CTO.
Can I piggyback off that question? Because if there's two graphics cards in one computer, does that really only kind of provide like the consensus is like kind of like one node? So it would actually be better if you had two different devices with two graphics cards. Does that like add more value in terms of like distributed in consensus or not?
Yeah, I know. So your question is, does it make better sense to have two different computers? I would say the answer to that question is twofold. If you're talking about a GPU or basically helping train AI models, I'm pretty sure you can have multiple graphics cards in the one machine and share them both out. And as I was saying, and I'm thinking about this, I know just internally in some of our testing, that's how we're actually running the tests. One machine, multiple graphics cards. But typically with DePIN, you actually want to have separate machines in separate locations. And the reason I say that is you've got an IP address at home or at the office, and certain bandwidth limitations. And there are certain DePINs that use your bandwidth, use your IP address. And so if you've got multiple devices connected to that same IP, only one of those DePINs is actually going to work. So you're not going to get the fullest of potential by running two separate machines in the same house, particularly if they got the same IP address, unless you've got two separate internet connections and you do it that way. So from the outside, it looks like they're two very different computers.
Okay. What about from Paul? What about sibling policy? How do you go?
I'm not sure. What do you mean? What about your sibling policy? How deeply do you go with checking this? Can you explain?
Can I ask with voice?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so when we're talking about the different projects, so you're talking about that only one device will use money from and credits, right? If they're working from one IP address. But when we're talking about different projects, especially from the previous years, when everyone was trying to catch like airdrops or something, so and a lot of guys can use like pretty shitty cookies or anti-detect browsers, something like that. And in most of cases, protocols gonna ban these sibling accounts from one users. So what about your sibling policy in terms of your project? And can you go deeper in how do you check this, how deeply you go in researching and banning these guys or something like that?
Yeah. So we've I'll take a step back and answer that question. So we're, as part of our system, we've had a number of airdrops as a way of rewarding our community. And I'll say our second airdrop was definitely fairer because we actually don't. You can have one account and you can run multiple machines, but what we've also discovered is that there are some really smart people out there that will spin up these nodes, these Havelo nodes running on these virtual machines. And one of the ways, and we had one person running like 1,000 virtual machines. Let's call it in the first airdrop, he or she would have received some tokens. In the second airdrop, they would have received nothing. And we had multiple people trying to game the system. And the reason, and the simple fix to that is if you're basically just spinning up a Havelo node just with the process of objective of earning some Havelo tokens, the way that we've now architected the system is if you're not earning even a couple of cents from one of the DePINs, which if you're running a virtual network, you're not going to be running any of those in the background. You'll be earning zero. We basically say, our system says, you're not a real computer. You're basically a fake computer trying to make us believe that you're a real computer, and we're going to basically pay you zero. And so we did that in the last airdrop. And I'm going to say there were thousands of people that got paid zero or thousands of nodes that got paid zero just because they were trying to game the system. And so we've spent a lot of time on making sure the people that are really contributing and got their computer on 24/7 and everything else are basically going to get top of the airdrop. And there's another airdrop that we're going to be running till early. I think the airdrop will be first quarter 2026. So the longer you run Havelo, the more points you get, and the more points convert into the Havelo tokens. And so that's basically
That takes
how
me
it works.
back to my question that I think that we got a little distracted from, and I'm sure we could keep going on and on about this topic, and we'll take one or two more questions before we need to move on. But so if I earn high value tokens and DePIN tokens, depending on what DePIN projects I'm participating in, what can I do with those? Are these utility tokens? Are these, can I cash them in? Can I convert them to stable coins? Can I spend them? What's the utility or value of these tokens?
Got it. Okay, yeah, apologies, I didn't answer that question. So once you get a token, whether it's the Havelo token or Mysterium or Nasana or any of the other DePINs that are running on our particular network, you can go into an exchange or a DEX and convert them to USDT, or Bitcoin or anything else, or you can just decide to keep them and hold them because you think we're still in a crypto spring and we're not in crypto summer yet, so you might as well keep the coins and wait until there's a big increase. With Havelo, if you earn Havelo, you're able to stake it and get an 88% APY return on your tokens. So you basically get Havelo, you stake it, and earn 88% per year if you were to hold it for a full 12 months. And it's just like any other token. You can pretty much do what you want with it. And so yeah, that's kind of answering that question. RB asks, can we do a sample run through in terms of numbers? So if you said RB laptop, I'm going to say desktop, and the reason I say a desktop is if you want a NVIDIA graphics card, it's basically Windows, and you need a desktop because you need to have a place to plug it in. You can do it on a laptop, but it's very fiddly, and I wouldn't recommend it. You can pick up an older desktop at a computer swap meet, get a good graphics, like a NVIDIA graphics card. That's the most important thing, is a really good graphics card. And running something like Nasana, you could be earning 40, 50 bucks a month if you've got a NVIDIA 4090 Plus. And if I take Nasana specifically, 49 is kind of like the base model graphics card. And then just let it run and just basically start earning money in terms of those tokens. And Danielle, you ask how long are the tokens locked? So the The Havelo staking platform, you lock only for 90 days. But what I've been doing is I've been, locking for 90 days personally, and this is all in a public domain because I personally posted when I basically staked, and when the stake completed, I got back my tokens and I just restaked again through the platform. Yeah, unfortunately, it's not a completely automated process. After your period, you've got to transfer the tokens back and then restake. It's just one of the limitations right now. In the future, you'll just be able to click a button and stake it, continually stake it without having to do anything. But at this point, there's a couple of checkbox process.
Okay, so 90 days, you can, so it's locked up. For those of you that don't understand staking, that can be a good homework research activity for you. But every time you stake, depending on what platform it is, they'll have different terms and conditions. And so I understand correctly, it's 90 days. After those 90 days, there's a bit of a manual process where you just unstake, but then you can restake it. And then you just do that to kind of like compound your interest.
Exactly that, which is what I've personally been doing myself, which it's on my Twitter. I basically tell the community every time I do it, just because, if you believe in Havelo like I do, I bought the token on market and then I basically staked it for an 88% APY. Kenneth, the only fees for staking are gas.
Okay,
So
so
we don't take any fees in that respect, but there are obviously gas fees. We're on Solana. They're pretty small, but in that respect, it's pretty small in regards to the fees.
Beautiful. All right, everyone, we put in last minute questions before we wrap it up. I am just going to share your X in the chat for anybody that wants to follow or connect with you and learn a little bit more. But what I've heard is, as you've been discussing, and maybe where a lot of what will be useful for a lot of beginners and a lot of the students that maybe will be even watching this recording, is a little cheat sheet of potentially how to get started. Because from what it sounds like, it's like, okay, you might be able to get started in affordable ways, but it's knowing that you need a Windows and what kind of GPU graphics cards, and kind of just, because if you don't come from a technical background like me, this is a whole nother language you're talking about. If AI wasn't around and I hadn't been hearing about NVIDIA and GPUs, that, I wouldn't even really have an understanding of that terminology at all. So I really wouldn't know where to get started. And I'm a Mac user, so that's why it's not working for me. And I'm on my laptop. So I'm like, okay, well, if I want to take DePIN seriously, I need to look at the hardware that I need. Just like how when I took my crypto seriously, I got a Ledger and a Trezor, and I took it really seriously. And as you said, having my private keys stored separately, which we cover a lot in previous lessons. And next week we'll be talking about dollar cost averaging, and setting it up in manual. And it kind of seems like the similar concepts all kind of apply to DePIN. You need to figure out your system, your hardware, how you're going to be operating it, how you're going to keep it safe. So I'm thinking a little cheat sheet I might have to make up for some of the beginners who want to get involved.
Yeah, and I'm happy to work with you with regards to that cheat sheet. Really, I mean, what I'll basically tell anyone who's interested is, if you are interested in DePIN, I would, because it's not just Havelo. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other DePINs, and this is such a nascent area and opportunities. Get a Windows machine with a NVIDIA graphics card, stick it in the corner, powered and connected to internet, and just basically start running all your DePIN on there. You'd be running, start with Havelo because it's really easy. And then as you start getting more experienced in the DePIN space, you can always, go outside of Havelo and look at other options as well.
Okay, one last question for you. Do you think that, so back in the day when people got into Bitcoin, right, if they were lucky enough in like 2010, 2011, they could get a computer and just run it, and they were earning Bitcoin. And then obviously that's not plausible to be able to just kind of do on your home computer, put it in there and run it. Do you think that that same thing will happen? Like, are we still early enough in DePIN, and that's why we can just go and get a Windows and a GPU and put it in the corner, but eventually we're going to have to have data centers like the Bitcoin mining? Or is it going to just be a repeat of the similar thing that happened to Bitcoin mining in DePIN? Or will it always be that's attainable for people to participate?
That's a really good question, and I'm going to try and sort of hypothesize here. And the way to answer that question is, once again, it's a twofold answer. There are certain DPINs that are not that interested in regards to how big and beefy your computer is, and if you've got a really big graphics card. If you're running something like Mysterium, it's about your IP address and your bandwidth, and not a lot about your CPU, or AOS. But if you're running the Sun, or it's all about your GPU, not so much about your CPU and your bandwidth. And so there are different DPINs that have a different requirement on your machine. And so in answering that very specific question, I think at least for the next 5 years, you'll be able to use, I'm going to say, consumer grade GPUs and still make money out of it. Like the NVIDIA 3090, the NVIDIA 4090s, you're still going to be able to make money out there. Maybe in 5 years, that's going to change. But then there are other DPINs, and it really doesn't matter if you've got a Mac device or a Windows device. It doesn't care about how big your graphics card is. It just matters about your storage. Storage is about storage. It's not about your CPU or your GPU or your bandwidth or your IP address. And so in that instance, it'll be different DPINs using different parts of your computer. In terms of, once again, just to sort of, one of the questions asks, RB asks, what do I see the future of DePIN? I'm a big believer of decentralization, and anyone who's in the crypto space, in my view, to a degree, by default, is a believer in decentralization. If you look at, take Bitcoin, for example, it's basically building decentralized financial infrastructure. And in my view, everyone's got a different view, but my view is that Bitcoin is like digital gold. It's a store of value. While there's some other tokens out there and stable coins that are really good for, let's call it transactional type processing. But coming back to your question around DePIN, when the internet first started, when we first got involved in the internet, when I first got involved in 1994, 1995, we built our own website and we hosted it at the office. So when the internet first started, it was by its very nature very decentralized. Over time, it became much more centralized, both in from an ISP perspective, the Amazon, the Google clouds of the world. Things became much more centralized, and I think with DePIN, you're going to start seeing an evolution going back to the roots of the internet, where things are much more decentralized. And just to give you an example here, if I'm an AI company and I need GPU cycles to train one of my AI models, I don't really care if it's in a data center or on a person's home computer, because I've just got a job to do, basically iterate this, like do an inference type job. But what I'm interested in is cost. Using DePIN infrastructure, or specifically DePIN GPU infrastructure, it's an 80 to 90 discount to going to a big data center, to a big data warehouse like an Amazon or a Google. So there's a really big benefit for AI companies going down that particular path. And that's just because there is so much demand for GPU cycles right now, that you basically, you can make money even on an older machine with an older 3090, 4090 NVIDIA graphics card.
Because the demand is there. And not that I want to go down this rabbit hole, but where we might kind of sum it up is, everyone's talking about AI and losing jobs, and they always say when jobs are lost, new ways of creating money and new opportunities are available. So not that I'm saying that going and getting a device and participating in DePIN is going to replace your job, but it will be interesting. There will be new ways of which we can, earn income streams, even to kind of feed what this whole ecosystem of AI, and obviously doing it in a decentralized way. And we're not going to unpack how blockchain is going to make, this whole AI ecosystem more secure. That's probably for another topic for another day. But I want to thank you so much for your time. I personally learned a lot. So if you got some value, please share in the chat if you enjoyed tonight. I have shared your X link, your LinkedIn, the link to Hivello if they're interested in learning more. My last question is, if they're interested in learning more and getting set up, where is the best place for them to start? I'm going to assume on the website.
Yeah, I would say go to hivello.com, install the software, run it, just to get a bit of a feel on how it works and how easy and simple the entire process is. Like with all things crypto, and sometimes when I talk about to my non-crypto friends, and they ask me, oh, well, how to get involved? Where should I start? And basically I say, there's this big universe of crypto, and there's new stuff coming out all the time. The best thing to do is just to start. Whether it's buying your first Bitcoin or 0.0001 of a Bitcoin and transferring that to your cold wallet, so you can learn about a ledger and Trezor and how to basically deal with private keys. So you start small, buy $100 worth. So if something happens in the background that you've stuffed something up, you've only basically spent $100 to learn, not $1 million to learn. So that is, in my view, the best way to get started with all of this, is just dip your toe in the water. And in my view, the reason, what we've found with a lot of even non-crypto people buying Hivello, that's their first foray of getting into crypto. They install Hivello, they earn these DePIN tokens, so they're earning crypto by just sharing their computer resource. They haven't even had to lay out any money out there in order to be able to basically start earning crypto.
And learning. So this is what I love. This is why I'm excited to continue, being a community partner with Hivello, because in our communities, we really focus on how do we help people. So that when your friends, your non-crypto friends, do ask you where to get started, you can send them my way, because we've got tons of different entry-level basic stuff to teach them. But having a way for them to learn practically with either little or to minimal investment, just to start learning, is the best way. So thank you so much for your time tonight. I think everybody got a lot of value. We really appreciate. And I'm going to see you at Token 49, won't I?
Absolutely. One of the best conferences out there for crypto.
Yes, definitely. We're hosting a few different events, so I hope that you can make one of them. So looking forward to seeing you then. Once again, thank you so much for your time. For everybody else, we are not done. The bootcamp lesson, the second half, we are going to talk about DAOs. So please stick around. But thank you so much,
Thanks, everyone.
Nate, for your time. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks in Token.
Thank you. Cheers.
All right, everybody. I hope that you got some value from that. Let me bring back up my slides, and we will jump in to the second half of the lesson. But actually, just quickly, before I jump back into the second half and talk about DAOs, I just wanted to quickly show, for those of you that haven't signed up to the Education Hub, I won't spend too much time in here, but I just wanted to give you a quick little visual that this is what it looks like currently. If you go to the weekly recordings, you'll find everything from the crypto basics to the Web3 basics. And then eventually we're going to have all these short courses, and we've got a whole bunch of more coming that will be in here for you. But while we've been delivering this live, you can go into the crypto trading or the Web3 basics. Web3 basics is Monday night. Crypto trading is on Wednesday. So for those of you that have been learning how to trade crypto, and then you can see the leaderboard of people that have been participating. So if you want access to that, all you need to do is sign up on the landing page, which I've shared the URL inside of do we get Dominique's slides? I'm sure if I asked him, he will share them and I can share them in the group for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump in and go over the second half of the lesson. Sorry, I want to present. And I hope that you all got some value there. All righty. Just make sure everybody can see my screen. We're good to go. What are DAOs? All right. So we talked about what are DePINs. Hopefully you got lots of value and you understand how, and if you want to participate in DePINs, where you're going to get started. And I'll definitely be working on a little cheat sheet. So DAOs. DAOs stand for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. We are going to cover them very high level. For a lot of you, if you're new to the space and you don't understand blockchain and you don't understand how it works, like Dominique mentioned, he is a very big believer in just decentralization. So there's blockchains that are decentralized, there's deep in these decentralized networks. We're talking about DAOs, which are, supposed to be these organizations that operate autonomously, and we'll unpack that. So essentially, it's a group of people coordinating without a central authority. It starts off as like a small group of people, and we'll unpack this as we go through today's lesson. But the idea is to then make it that it's not one person that is kind of in control. All right, so the rules and the operations are enforced by these smart contracts that are executed using the blockchain technology. But obviously, these rules and these operations need to be coded up in the beginning, and these rules need to be determined. So who determines these roles? We will unpack that as we go through. So it's important to be understanding, okay, well, the governing members can participate, and I'm a part of a few different DAOs. Actually, ask in the chat, who here is a part of a DAO? Any type of DAO. It could be a social DAO, education. So I'm a part of a couple, and I'm going to unpack through some of those examples. But just interested if anybody, I know that earlier a few people were participating in DePINs, but what about DAOs? And if you are, I'd love for you to share inside of the chat. But as if you're a DAO member, so a lot of the times you'll have to have like an NFT membership to be a part of the DAO. And then a part of the DAO, you can then vote. So I'm a part of an education DAO, I'm a part of C3 DAO, and a part of me having that membership, I'm allowed to vote on certain things and decisions and choices that the DAO makes, okay? And so all of these are recorded onto the blockchain. It makes it fully kind of completely transparable. So think of DAOs another way. So there's no CEO, there's no centralized leadership. It runs autonomously by the code. So once the contracts are coded, and we're going to talk about how do we get there, but in the beginning, obviously somebody needs to code them up, but once they're up, they're running autonomously. And everybody that has kind of come together collectively, and I've got some good examples of some DAOs in just a moment, they all kind of come together. One of the examples is the investment SunDAO, and they did a workshop for us. And so a whole bunch of people are going to put their money in collectively, and then they use the DAO to make the decision so on how they're going to use those monies to invest, rather than in kind of like traditional kind of investing. You give your money to the company, and they make all the decisions, rather than people actually voting on how those funds are going to be invested. So if you want to kind of think of a very simple analogy, you can kind of think of a DAO as like a group chat, or a group of people. Maybe a group of people would be better than a chat, with a shared bank account where they get to make decisions by voting, okay? But this bank account runs on code. Now, we're using the example of bank because a lot of people can relate to that, but DAOs can be for anything. It could be for proposals, and we're going to go through some examples. But a lot of the times, chains might create a DAO, and then you could put a proposal forward for a grant, and then the entire DAO can vote whether you get that grant. So that's just kind of like an example, but I've got plenty more examples that we'll go through. So how do DAOs work? So as I mentioned in the beginning, you need some founders. Somebody has to have a mission. So the C3, her DAO, which is being led by Kara, she's initiating it. She's bringing in these other leaderships, women in leadership, including myself, in saying, hey, let's create this DAO. Let's share this mission. We're all on the same vision of empowering and supporting more women and providing free education. How do we do that? So even though she's the founder of the DAO, her goal is to make it decentralized. So as Dominique said, how the internet started off kind of decentralized and then went centralized, and now it's going back to more decentralized. Well, a lot of the time structures still have to start off kind of a bit more decentralized so that you kind of get the formation, but then you write the rules into the smart contracts, and then those rules can't be broken. But a group of people do have to come up, what are the rules? How are the decisions being made? Who is coding it? How are you auditing your smart contracts? We're not going to talk about that today, but we did do a call with Paula from Hashlock a couple of weeks ago. But there's lots of different things that you need to take into consideration before those smart contracts are deployed, and then that's when it becomes automated in the different system that you've created with your governance and your treasury and your voting. So DAOs will launch, they'll have tokens, okay, that you use. So a lot of the times they'll be called a governance token. And we're going to go through some different examples of different types of DAOs. But just think of if I'm a part of a DAO, I'll get issued tokens where if they're making a decision on, say, the example like I gave you earlier, whether we want somebody to win a grant application to, build a project or do whatever, the entire DAO needs to vote using those governance tokens. Okay, so remember how we talked about tokens and how they have different types of functionality and utility? Well, in DAOs, you use these governance tokens and they represent your voting power. So community proposes an idea, so we'll just keep using the example. So I have an idea and I need $100,000 to bring this idea to life. I put a proposal, to the community, and then the community decides whether they think that my project is a good idea, it's solving a good problem. And then if everybody, if I meet the rules and the terms and the conditions and there's enough votes, then I could be allocated that money, and that would all be done on the smart contract, and it would, transfer the money. And I'm sure a lot of the times, and I don't want to unpack it onto a deep technical level, but a lot of the times when you get issued grants through these different types of proposals, it will be like vested over time. So it might be like, okay, well, you've got $100,000 for your project. You're going to be given $25,000 every quarter, and you have to have met X, Y, Z requirements, and you must, if you didn't meet that KPI or that goal or meet that deadline, then you won't get the other, release of the funds, because it's been built in and baked into the contract. Okay, so voting happens on chain, as we've already talked about, and then using these smart contracts to kind of carry out the decisions. So on a very high level, that's how DAOs work. There's many different types of DAOs, and I'm actually going to go through some examples. And one of the homework videos that I have for you is actually the workshop that we did a couple of months ago with SunDAO, which is an investment DAO, which is a great example. But there are different types of DAOs. Now it's taking a minute to load these articles because I think some of them, no, these are all just articles. And so I've added those in there so that you can go and do your own research, and there's actually a research activity for you to do. Okay, but protocol DAOs, so Uniswap, MakerDAO, ENS, these are protocols. Okay, and you can go and participate in these protocols and earn, different types of, tokens, also different types of ways of participating. For example, the ENS, DAO. He talked about airdrops previously. Years ago, if you were participating or if you were a part of the ENS community, you got an airdrop, and then a part of that, there was this whole, I had to go through the whole process, and it was really weird. I had to kind of like do this whole voting process. I didn't really know what I was doing. It was many years ago. But my point is that these are protocol DAOs. Now, another type are investment DAOs. So I talked about Sundow. There is a very good video. I shared the link for you to go and watch. Highly recommend it. I learned a lot from that workshop with Sundow and how they do it. Upside DAO is an Australian-based DAO that was formed in Melbourne. So those are a couple of examples that you can go and look at. There's lots of them. Just go and type in investment DAOs and start doing your homework and your research. But of course, I'm going to use some, local Australian examples since I'm based here in Australia. Grants, I've talked about grants and public good DAOs. This is Gitcoin is probably one of the largest ones. But as I talked about, a lot of different protocols. So whether it be Polkadot or Avalanche or Sui or Berachain or 8chain, any of them, they generally have DAOs within there. And then you can, if you want to build or you want to do something, you want to organize an event, you want to do something, and then you can put a proposal forward. Well, that's what these kind of grant and public good DAOs, and a lot of the times, big companies will allocate, I call it as public good, or like their charitable funds to give back to the community, and to also incentivize people to build and be proactive on their particular chains. So those are just some good examples for you to start when you go and do your research activity. Now, we're not going to dive super deep because I am not an expert. I could probably bring in an expert, just like how we brought in Dominique from Hivelo today, and dive deeper. And as we go through and build out the education hub, we will be bringing in guest speakers that, specialize in particular areas. Regulation in legal status of DAOs is definitely not my area of expertise, but what you need to know is that there's still a lot of gray area in a lot of different countries, and it is still very unknown territory. So just be wary of that. There are some, different jurisdictions that are trying to kind of like be first to market. But at the moment, people are like, okay, well, if there's no legal, entity, who owns the IP, who opens the bank accounts, who signs the contracts? So there's a lot of questions around these DAO structures. Now, there's Wyoming and Marshalllands, which are kind of the two jurisdictions that are trying to be first to market and kind of create a regulatory framework for people to register a DAO. So if you're interested in registering a DAO or you want one, this is where I would start. If you're interested, or you're a lawyer, or a lawyer who wants to start educating themselves on DAOs and how they would actually work from a legal perspective. We're actually hosting an event in Melbourne at a law firm, so this would be a great opportunity to ask them some of these questions. But just know currently a lot of unregulatory certainty around DAOs and how they operate and how they work. So just make sure that you're continuously educating yourself, especially if you are going to participate in a DAO or create a DAO, because you really want to know who is actually liable if the DAO causes harm. What happens if it breaks laws? Are they tokens? Are they considered securities? Are they considered, a utility? What about taxes? So what about anti-money laundering? So there's a lot of questions around these DAO structures, and what happens if somebody were to get sued. So there's a lot of, things that you have to take into consideration if you're going to participate in DAOs. The DAOs that I participate are not investing DAOs. They're more educational. They're more membership DAOs. But really, if you're doing any type of like SunDAO goes through a lot of great questions, so I recommend that because they're an investment DAO. And there would be a lot more regulatory considerations that you would have to take in compared to the education DAO that I'm a part of, where we all kind of buy our memberships and the money's pooled, and then you can kind of like vote and you share resources. It's very different from a social DAO or a community DAO compared to, say, an investment DAO. So very, very, very important that you educate yourself. That I do know lots of lawyers. So we can think about bringing in a guest speaker and talk about DAOs and the regulatory environment of them. But we're not going to go any further than that today, because we've covered a lot. We've talked about DePINs, how you can get started. You now understand what DAOs are, on a very high level. Now, a quick reminder, if you have been joining us with the boot camp, or if you've just kind of found us, we have partnered with Bybit. If you sign up using our referral link, we'll give you $5 on us just so that you can test how easy it is to spend money using stablecoins. You can get the Bybit app on the card. We'll send you $5. And then they have their own offer. If you deposit $100 of USD worth of USDT or $100 USD, they'll give you $20 on top of that. So that's just a little bonus that they have for people that want to get started. As I said, we always have a homework research activity. So this week will be about DAOs and DePINs. So going and doing your homework and doing your research. We have provided a lot of different examples. I would start with Hivelo because, as I said, they had about, I think off the top of my head, there was like 11 different DePINs. So they're an aggregator. So they have a lot there that you can go and research. We've given you lots of different examples of the different DAOs that you can go and research. We always have a quiz that you can do, and you can find the link I showed you earlier where that you can join. We always have the learning resource and the video. I highly recommend the Let's Learn the workshop with SunDAO. It was a very good learning. So that is it for me today. Is there any last minute questions that anybody has about DAOs? Thank you, Ep. No worries. I hope that you all got value. I was just checking in the chat. But if there are no other questions regarding the content that we've covered with DAOs, I promise we'll bring in an expert around the regulatory environment and unpack DAOs further. But I think for now, your brain should be full. You should understand what DAOs are on a high level, understand what DePIN is on a high level, and ways that you can start participating and potentially maybe even earning some extra income from an old computer, an old Windows computer. I don't have a Windows computer. I'm going to have to look at getting one. But thank you. Just 2 types of DAOs. No, I must have had a slide missing, to be honest. I had another slide in here that had a whole bunch of different types of DAOs, and it didn't seem to make its way on here, but there's all sorts of different types of DAOs. So there's social DAOs, protocol DAOs. Gosh, I'm trying to remember all of them off the top of my head. But the protocol ones, the social, grants. So there's quite a few different ones that, but definitely go, and when you do your research, there's many different types of DAOs that you can participate in. We just kind of covered the most popular ones, which are your governance, your social, your protocol DAOs, your investment DAOs. So I think those are the main 4 ones that we covered today. But definitely when you go down your research activity. I'm sure you'll discover a whole bunch more. Thank you, Kenneth, for those of you that are interested in High Velo, available on for download Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. So yeah, go have fun. I've downloaded the High Velo app. It's super easy. My only issue is that I have a Mac computer, and so I actually need to go and do the whole proper setup and just leave it in the computer because I'm constantly turning my laptop on and off, so it's not signing up for High Velo was super easy for me, and that was all good, but I just actually need to get the proper equipment to be able to do it. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope that you got some value, and I will see you next week. Oh, you know what? That's the other thing I realized I missed. I think I'm missing 2 slides. Next week, we will be talking about dollar cost averaging and your investment mindset as the last session for the boot camp. All right, everyone, have a good night, and I will see you next week, or you can join on Wednesday night to learn about our crypto basics trading boot camp. All right, everyone, have a good night.